Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. Now, I'll forgive you if you find it very difficult to believe the details of today's true crime story, because if not for the fact that I had confirmed it on credible sources like Wikipedia, I would have also found it very difficult to believe it myself if somebody told me the story. It's the story of a man who was formerly a director at a bank in Nigeria who would become a confidence trickster and end up defrauding a bank in Brazil by selling them a non-existent imaginary airport for a whopping $242 million. That qualified him to hold the record for the third highest banking fraud and crime in history. Today's true crime story is about a man called Emmanuel Nwude from Nigeria, West Africa. And if you are ready for that true crime story, please buckle up and let's go. Well, Emmanuel Nwude is like the Elon Musk of all the fraudsters in Nigeria. And if you are familiar with Nigeria and fraud, you would bear with me that in recent times, Nigeria has been one of the major fraud exports to the world. Now, with this crime that Emmanuel Nwude committed, I'm yet to actually know of any other fraud in Nigerian history or world fraud history perpetrated by a Nigerian that actually beats or topples his fraud that he committed in this case. So for me, he holds the record. Unless you know of something I don't, you can leave that in the comment section. But that is what this guy did. There's a popular saying that money is the root of all evil, and trust you me, Emmanuel wanted all the money. Who was he? Emmanuel Nwude Odinigwe was also popularly known as Owele of Abagana, and he is a Nigerian advanced free fraud expert artist. And can you believe this? He's the former director of the Union Bank of Nigeria. So he was actually a legitimate employee of a bank, and he was working in the capacity of a director for that bank. And he is known for defrauding one person called Nelson Sakaguchi, who was also a director of a bank in Brazil, a bank called Banco Noroeste, based in Sao Paulo of Brazil, of an amount of $242 million. And in this, he took $191 million in cash and the remainder in the form of outstanding interest between the years of 1995 and 1998. And guess what? Like any efficient and effective fraudster, he didn't do it alone. He had accomplices. Now his accomplices were Emmanuel Ofolue, Nzeribe Okoli, and Obum Osakwe, along with a husband and wife duo by name Christian Ikechukwu Anajemba and Amaka Anajemba. So you see, when the two are one, here we have the situation of a husband and a wife aiding this fraudster. And I think that they were perfect for each other, this husband and wife, because ideally, one of them could have been compromised by Emmanuel, but at least the other should have been the control check to bring the compromised party out of such a fraud commitment. But some way, somehow, you find this couple actually aiding Emmanuel Nwude in his fraud of the century. But unfortunately, of these two husbands, of this husband and wife, the husband will end up being assassinated under very strange circumstances. But the question still looms: how did they perpetrate this fraud? How did they do it? And that is going to be at the center of today's true crime presentation. This was how they did it. Emmanuel Nwude impersonated Paul Oguma, the then governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and he would be able to do this to an extent because, mind you, one, he is the director of a bank, or let me say he was the director of a bank at the time. So obviously he is familiar with the industry. He is familiar with how things go. He is familiar with the terminologies. He is familiar with the processes and procedures for various forms of transactions in the banking industry. And the target victim is another bank and their director. So he is dealing with someone in his industry. And having to be in the capacity of a director presumes or presumably means that he is very knowledgeable in banking. So if he decides to take that knowledge, and it seems he's intelligent as well, so if he decided to take that knowledge and add his intelligence, then with a very good team, he was good to go. So he started by impersonating the then governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and by so doing, he was able to successfully convince Sakaguchi, who was the then director of Brazil's Banco Noroeste, to invest in a new airport in the capital city of Nigeria, Abuja, in exchange for a $10 million commission. Now, in August of 1997, the Spanish Banco Santander wanted to take over the Banco Noroeste of Brazil. So this is where things would begin to come up, because Nwude had been able to convince Sakaguchi, and Sakaguchi had actually sent him the money to invest in this airport, which some way, somehow, he was able to be manipulated by Emmanuel and his fraud gang to the extent he never saw the need to do any form of extensive due diligence to confirm the existence of these assets. And it baffles me the level of convincing it will take, the level of scheming and scamming it will take to convince the director of this bank to part with $242 million without going down or sending people down to come and confirm whether this airport really existed. I don't understand. Well, I think maybe that's what sets me apart from that confidence trickster, because it looks like they did a really great job on this victim of theirs. Not to praise them, but it looks like they achieved their results extensively. And so the money was parted, and it took 3 years before this fraud will be uncovered. That is another surprise. 3 good years. So what was going on in the books of this bank? Where were their auditors? What were they doing? What questions were being asked about this amount? Well, so it would be up until 1997 when the Spanish Banco Santander wanted to take over the Banco Noroeste of Brazil that the fraud would start being uncovered. Ultimately, the fraud was uncovered after a December 1997 joint board meeting in which an official from Santander inquired about why a large sum of money, which was about 2/5 of Noroeste's total value and half of their capital, was sitting in the Cayman Islands unmonitored by anybody. Now, this led to criminal investigations in various countries worldwide. The countries were Brazil, Britain, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the United States. To guarantee the sale to Santander, the Simonsen and Cochran families, who were the owners of Banco Noroeste, paid the $242 million themselves. However, Banco Noroeste could not be saved because it eventually went on to collapse in 2001. Now, as for Nelson Sakaguchi, he was later arrested at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport, and he was dispatched to Switzerland to stand trial on charges relating to setting up bank accounts there as part of the fraud scheme. So it was more like aiding and abetting, and I'm sure there will be some spices or menu or some bits of charges on money laundering also thrown in there to add to his issues. Now, in the aftermath of this, at the request of the former Nigerian president, Olusegun Obasanjo, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was created by the Nigerian Parliament in 2002, and in February 2004, Amaka Anajemba, Emmanuel Nwude, Emmanuel Ofolui, Nzeribe Okoli, and Obum Usakwe were all arrested and charged in the Abuja High Court with 86 counts of fraudulently seeking advance fees and 15 counts of bribery related to the case. They all pleaded not guilty, and they were immediately warned off of bribing the court staff by Abuja High Court Judge Lawal Gumi after he alleged that money was going around. Obviously, money would go around because they had the money to spend. And that is one of the challenges in some countries in Africa when it comes to legal issues, because sometimes some officials become susceptible to bribe. And I'm happy that this judge was able to stand his ground and insist on the right thing and professionalism. Now, the defense team assured that nothing would be done to bring scandal to the administration of the justice. The 4 Nigerian companies who were also partly involved in the whole issue, namely Finbars, Emeros, Ocean Marketing, and the African Shelter Bureau, also faced charges and pleaded not guilty. And in July 2004, Judge Lawal Gumi will end up throwing out the case on the grounds that since the crime did not take place in Abuja, he had no jurisdiction, and said that the proper place for the case would be the Lagos High Court. Rightly so. Now, the defendants were immediately rearrested just after they stepped outside the courthouse, and the case was then moved to Lagos to be pursued from there. And in 2005, Nwude attempted to bribe Nuhu Ribadu, the then head of the commission, with $75,000 cash. He was charged in connection with the attempted bribery in addition to the attempted kidnapping of a prosecution witness. This is what I was talking about. When the money is there and the one who has the money is caught up in trouble or is in a fix, most of the time he would begin to employ the money to try and weave his way out of whatever he's facing. Woe unto you if you are a stumbling block in his way. So, it continued. In July 2005, Amaka Anajemba admitting to helping Anajemba and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and ordered to repay $25.5 million. Don't forget, Amaka Anajemba is the wife of the other accomplice who was in the crime together with Emmanuel Nwude. Her husband had been assassinated at this time, so she was alone facing trial. Now, during Nwude's trial, there was a bomb scare that caused the courthouse to be evacuated. Emmanuel Nwude and Nzeribe Okoli pleaded guilty after testimony from Sakaguchi in hopes of a more lenient sentence, and were sentenced to 29 years in prison collectively, with Nwude receiving 5 consecutive sentences of 5 years, which would then total 25 years, and Okoli receiving 4. Now, the entirety of Nwude's assets were confiscated to be returned to the victim, and a $10 million fine was imposed to be paid to the Nigerian federal government. It was the first major conviction for the EFCC since it was set up. So it seemed like the case was sort of ended, but it wasn't. Emmanuel was released from prison in 2006. And and afterwards, Nwude filed a lawsuit to recover his seized assets after he was released from prison, on the grounds that some of the assets seized were acquired by him before the offense was committed. If that's true, well, I think that is a fair assertion, and they also had to look into that. And as at the time of making this video, he had already reclaimed about $52 million worth of assets. And as of 8th of May 2015, the matter was still being heard, and it was being handled by the Lagos Division of the Court of Appeal. This would escalate to further developments, and on the 19th of August 2016, the town of Ukpu in the Dunokofia area was attacked by over 200 people, apparently as a result of a land dispute with another neighboring community called the Abagana. In this attack, 4 policemen were shot, and Emmanuel Okafo, who was a security guard at a construction site, ended up being killed. You will see that this does not really relate with the fraud case, but it was still relevant because Emmanuel Nwude was cited to be at the center of it. Now, the Anambra State Police Command alleged that Emmanuel Nwude was a ringleader, and they therefore arrested him on 27 charges, including murder, attempted murder, and terrorist attacks. He was being held at Auka prison in Anambra State, but he would end up being released on bail on December 8, 2016. Emmanuel Nwude is the President General of Ugbene Town Union, and on Thursday, 25th February 2021, Emmanuel Nwude, while testifying before Justice Mojisola Dada of the Ikeja Special Offences Court, now denied knowing the source of the $242 million that was transferred into his account. Emmanuel, after serving part of his 25-year jail term, is back in court alongside 2 of his lawyers, and all 3 face a 15-count charge of forging the documents of a property. Justice Oyewole had earlier ordered Mr. Nwude to forfeit to his victims. Now, this property is located, I won't mention the address, but then it turns out that they actually didn't fully obey the instruction of the court. They actually forged the documents of the property that they were to forfeit to their victims. And this is a serious issue. It's one thing you are being on trial for fraud and whatever you've done, but it's another thing when you begin to circumvent court orders and try to forge documents on assets that the court has asked you to relinquish to your victims. So it looks like Emmanuel Nwude is not out of the woods yet. This is a case that started in the late 90s into the early 2000s, and we're already in 2023, and it's still being battled out in one form or the other. We wait to see how things will go. But as it stands now, Emmanuel Nwude, in my books, holds the record for the most expensive fraud done in Nigerian history, and the 3rd largest crime or fraud in banking history worldwide. What are your comments on this? What do you think about what they did? What do you think could have made it impossible for it to be successful? What do you think the bank should have done? And let me use this medium to sensitize all of us that when something seems too good to be true, usually it isn't. All that glitters may not be gold. Always do your due diligence. Trust, or I would even advise don't trust, but in case you decide to trust, please don't forget to verify. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. To all our returning subscribers, we thank you so much. Hit the like button, hit the notifications button. It's free to do that, but it means the whole world to us. And as I always say, keep an eye out and stay safe out there. We'll catch you next time.